This is a meeting of the Harlem Municipal Utilities Board of Trustees, and call the meeting to order. I need the approval of the agenda. Any conflicts of interest?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Roll call vote?
Yes.
Vote?
Oh, Michelle, yes.
Terry, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber Day.
Okay. Approval of the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda will be enacted by one motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a request is made prior to the board votes on the motion. No prior requests. Consent agenda items may include non-controversial subjects. Meetings of the July 22nd board meeting, abstract claims number 1194 in the amount of $864,951.51. In the upcoming board meetings, August 26th is another regular board meeting, and September 9th is an electronic board meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Michelle, aye.
Terry, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber Day.
Next on the agenda is the Clifton Allen Larson appraisal.
Yes, this is just to receive and file the CLA. That's the second business appraisal. We reviewed the invoice at the last meeting, but we failed to officially receive and file the appraisal itself. So.
And there's no vote required on this, right?
Just vote to receive and file, that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I move to receive and file the appraisal.
I second.
Roll call vote.
Michelle, aye.
Terry, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber Day.
Okay.
And we do have Steve Nadel on the line if there's any questions about the next item.
Okay.
He did dial in.
Item number 5, resolution taking initial action regarding the potential discontinuance and disposal by sale of the Harlem Municipal Communications Utility. Consider appraisals, determine the fair market value, consideration of alternatives, approve information regarding the municipal communications utility, order posting of information and mailing notice of proposed sale, council to call special election.
If you would like, we could have Mr. Nadel kind of give a brief overview, just so everyone's clear on exactly.
That would be good.
Okay. All right.
Steve, were you able to hear that?
I was, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here and for working through this process. As you well know, as a result of the city having received the petition, the board is going through the process of complying with Iowa Code Section 388.2A regarding a number of preliminary items that must be done before the council can call the special election as a result of the petition. So the utility's been diligently working through that process, and now's the time where that is all wrapping up, and all of the things required by 388.2A are now in front of you. And so this resolution covers a lot of ground because it covers each of those items. From a high level, I think we should maybe walk through it just so you're aware of each piece that's there, although that's really covered by the title of it. You know, each piece goes into that in a little more detail in each section of the resolution. There also is one item we should discuss the specific language of before the board takes a vote on it to make sure that we've got the right language that you want. So with that, let me ask, would you like me to just walk through the resolution just so everybody sees it, or has everybody reviewed it and you just want to ask questions before we get to that item of the specific language I mentioned?
I think it'd be good to walk through it.
Okay, great. So I will do that. You know, obviously you've got the resolution title and that's been read to you. I'll just read through the whereas paragraphs. The first one acknowledges that the board controls and operates the municipal communications utility. You are the governing body. the city received the petition to call the special election regarding authorization to discontinue and dispose of the communications utility by sale. Let me add, by the way, and this is covered at the end of the resolution, but just to make sure the board knows this, even if the election passes, that does not require a sale of the utility. So I just want to make sure you understand that context. The whereas paragraphs continue and go on in the state that 388.2 of the code authorizes the city to discontinue and dispose of a city utility by sale, subject to the approval of the voters. So again, that's authority to do it, not a requirement to do it. The next whereas states that section 388.2A outlines certain procedures which must be followed prior to submitting this type of a proposal to the electors. The next paragraph states the board believes it's necessary and appropriate to follow those procedures. In fact, you need to follow those procedures and to take certain other actions before the city council can call the election on the question of whether this board should be authorized to discontinue and dispose of the communications utility by sale. That brings me to another point. Even if the election passes, it's still this board as the governing body of the utility that would address if and ever the board wants to go through a process to explore selling the utility or not. That's all in the board's discretion as the governing body. The election simply would provide authority.
Being recorded.
The last whereas references that a whole bunch of related documents, including the appraisals, a fair market value calculation, inventory of property, statement of net position and balance sheet, financial information statement, which contains current and projected rate schedules, prior and projected revenue statements, documentation of consideration of alternatives, a packet of all the mentioned information, a notice of the proposal to dispose of the utility by sale, a summary of the proposal, a summary of all of that information referenced above, and instructions for finding that information are on the website. And all of that has been prepared and is now before this board. You have a large packet of information in front of you that contains all of that information, except also in front of you, Exhibit A to this resolution that we're walking through contains the notice and the summaries and the instructions to find information on the website. So between the packet and the resolution and the Exhibit A, everything is all in front of you. So then we get to the body of the resolution itself and the sections. Section 1, the board is acknowledging receipt of all three of the appraisals and finds those appraisals compliant with the requirement of 388.2A to obtain the appraisals. Section 2, the board has to, under 388.2A, make a determination of fair market value. So there is a written determination of fair market value that the board, that's in front of the board, that the board will be making a finding of that amount as the fair market value. But you should understand how that's calculated and make sure that you are in agreement with that, although it's driven by statute. The statute requires the board to make a finding of fair market value, and it's required to be the greater of three things. One is the average of the two appraisals, and in this case, that's the CLA and LWBJ appraisals. That and that's all set out in that determination of fair market value in the packet. That's item number 1. Item number 2 is, if I remember correctly, the value of the equipment. And item number 3 is all outstanding obligations of the communications utility. And it's got to be the largest of the 3. And the largest of the 3 is the latter item, which is the value of the revenue obligations of the communication utility. Ken has provided a calculation of the actual bonds that have been issued, plus the interfund loan from the electric utility that is still owed back to the electric utility. That amount totals $1,921,076.78. So that, again, that number has come from Ken as being the sum of kind of the borrowing obligations of the communications utility, because that's the largest of the 3 items that are required to be considered in the determination of fair market value. By statute, the board is required to find that amount as being the fair market value. So that calculation is set forth in the packet. You have that at the packet with that in front of you. There's a specific page on that. You can certainly take time to find that in the packet if you've not already. But this section 2 makes that finding of the fair market value as presented to you in front of you right now in that page. Section 3 goes on and states that the board has prepared an inventory of the utilities' real and personal property. That's in the packet. A statement of net position and a balance sheet of the utility, including all assets, liabilities, and outstanding revenue and general obligations used to finance the communication utility system. So it's the inventory, statement of net position, and balance sheet. Those are in front of you. Section 3 accepts and approves those. And I should add, the statute only requires the statement of net position or the balance sheet. It depends on what books are kept. In your situation, the statement of net position is pulled directly out of your audit. And because that's an audited statement, I thought that should be included. But because you also have a more current unaudited balance sheet that Ken had provided, I thought that should be included. I did not want to include only the balance sheet when you've got an audited statement of net position out there, but when you have a more up-to-date balance sheet as of, I think, December 31 year end, I thought it would be prudent to just include both, and then nobody could question why you picked one versus the other one. So both of them are in there, both are being approved as part of the packet. And of course, as you'll see later in the resolution, the full packet will ultimately be ordered by the board to be posted to the website of HMU as required by 388.2A. So moving on to section 4, in accordance with 388.2A, the board has prepared a financial information statement of the communications utility that includes the current rate schedule, projected rate schedules for the next 5 years, which the HMU staff has prepared, as well as the 5 most recent fiscal year revenue statements. Those have been pulled from your audits, and a projection of the utilities revenue statements for the next 5 fiscal years. And that's the consortia information that is found in the packet, and they did that work for the utility for this purpose. And then obviously the last sentence of that section 4, the financial information statement and the contents thereof are accepted and approved in the form now before this board. Section 5, in accordance with 388.2A, the communications utility has considered alternatives to disposing of the communication utility by sale, as summarized in the document in the packet titled Documentation of Alternatives Considered, which is now before this board. So for background, 388.2A requires the governing body to consider alternatives before a proposal to sell a communication utility is presented in an election. Of course, like much of this, it doesn't make perfect sense when the board has not explored selling the utility. The board had no plans to sell the utility. The board is not proposing an actual sale of the utility, but the statutory language for the election talks about a proposal to discontinue and dispose of the utility by sale, and the petition requires the election. So throughout the proceedings and in the packet and on the website, we're utilizing the language from the statute that talks about a proposal to discontinue and dispose of the utility by sale. And of course, the statute requires you consider alternatives. Well, the board hasn't pursued a sale, but nonetheless, the type of alternatives that would be considered and that would be required to be considered before actually pursuing a sale are various alternatives that I lump into the category of things that would add, make for better service, lower cost service, or reduction of expenses or increases of revenues, right? We're talking about alternatives in the way things are operated that would enhance or improve the services or the economics of the communications utility. And the communication utility has, in fact, according to Ken, considered those things he provided me an itemization, and those are summarized in that document in the packet titled Documentation of Alternatives Considered. And so the board is required to consider, or the communication utility is required to consider alternatives. It's my understanding they have been considered, and this is further memorializing that the board itself has considered those alternatives, and that summary is accepted and approved in the form now before this board. Section 6, all of the aforementioned information demonstrating compliance with Section 388-2A has been collected and prepared in a packet now before this board. The board finds the packet to be complete and contains the information required by 388-2A. That packet is accepted and approved in the form before the board. Section 7, in accordance with 388-2A, the secretary of the board, with assistance from staff, is directed to post the full packet of information described above, including all of that information required by 388-2A, on HMU's website at least 60 days prior to November 2, 2021. The secretary is further directed to post any offers and appraisals which may be received from potential purchasers, if any. So 388-2A requires posting all of that information at least 60 days before the election. And if any offers or appraisals have been received from a potential purchaser, that must also be posted on the website. So the packet's in front of you. This is simply ordering the secretary to post it now that the board is approving that packet, and then it's ordering the posting. And of course, that's done with the assistance of HMU staff. And those arrangements have been made. I've been coordinating with Ken and Jenny regarding what that posting will look like, what the link on HMU's website will look like, and the instructions for finding the information on the website are included in the notice, which is the Exhibit A to this resolution, and we'll talk about that when we get there. And then Section 8 goes on and talks about, in accordance with 388-2A, the secretary, with assistance from staff, is directed to provide by regular mail to each property owner of the city and each ratepayer of the communication utility a notice of the proposal to dispose of the communications utility by sale, a summary of that proposal, a summary of the aforementioned information that's going to be posted on the website, and instructions for locating that information on the website, all substantially in the form attached here to as Exhibit A, which notices, summaries, and instructions, or notice, singular, summaries and instructions, all as set forth in Exhibit A, are hereby accepted and approved in the form now before this board with such changes as may be approved by the chairperson, secretary, and legal counsel for HMU. All of that information is required by 388.2A to be done. You're required to post all of that information, the packet, on the website. And 388.2A requires a good faith effort to provide notice to the property owners of the city and the ratepayers of the utility of the proposal. And you've got to include a summary of the proposal, a summary of the information posted on the website, and instructions for finding that information on the website. So all of that's required to be mailed out, or at least a good faith effort to mail out to all the property owners of the city, the ratepayers of the communication utility. And that's why Exhibit A is drafted the way it is. It's drafted to include the notice, the summary of the proposal, or the notice, the summary of the proposal, the summary of the information that's posted on the website, and the instructions to find that information. So here, I think we're going to just kind of flag mark in your mind. Let's just finish up going through Section 9 and 10 since we're so near done with those items. And then when we get to Exhibit A, I'm going to want to talk about some language there, okay? And also language in Section 7 of the resolution. So going back to the body of the resolution, we just talked about Section 8, which references the Exhibit A. Section 9. With the aforementioned posting and mailing as set forth above, all requirements of Section 388.2A will be satisfied, and the City Council can proceed to call the special election on the question of whether this board should be authorized to discontinue and dispose of the communication utility by sale. Section 10. As provided by Section 388.2A, A proposal to discontinue and dispose of a city utility by sale that is approved by the voters shall not require the governing body to finalize a sale of the city utility. That covers the body of the resolution. Then we get to Exhibit A, okay? And let's also, in conjunction with Exhibit A, I want to look at, keep in mind the last sentence of Section 7, which says the Secretary is further directed to post any offers and appraisals which may be received from potential purchasers, okay? And there's a reason why I want you to remember that phrase. So now let's walk through Exhibit A. In fact, I'm going to make a note to myself. Give me one moment. So Exhibit A starts with notice of proposal to discontinue and dispose of the communication utility by sale, summary of proposal, summary of information regarding the communications utility posted on the website, and instructions for locating the information on the website. That's the title of this. That's what's supposed to be sent. First main paragraph, you're notified an election will be held Tuesday, November 2 for submission of a proposal asking whether the Board of Trustees of HMU shall be authorized to discontinue and dispose of the communications utility by sale. Summary of proposal. Okay, a couple things about this summary. I think we should read it. I'll read it out loud. Of course, you're perfectly capable of that, but I want us all to kind of view that together. There are several things going on here. One of which is explaining exactly what's happening and why. And I thought and advised that that's important to do in order to avoid confusion and avoid the risk of misleading the public. So you're required to include a summary of the proposal to discontinue and dispose of the utility by sale. The board is not actually proposing discontinuing and selling the utility. And my worry was that if that's not explained, and if the context of the petition isn't explained, that voters, ratepayers, and property owners who get this might think that there actually is an active effort to sell the utility. And I think the transparent thing to do is to explain exactly what is going on. So you are doing everything that you can to comply with the statute and to provide clarity to these circumstances. Without telling people what to do in either way, that's not the purpose of this whatsoever. The purpose is to provide accurate information regarding the proposal. So here's what's been drafted. And keep in mind that this was drafted several days ago. The city of Harlan received a petition asking the city to call an election for submission of a ballot proposition for authorization to discontinue and dispose of the municipal communications utility by sale. Although there are no plans in place or offers for sale of the utility, and there is no actual sale being proposed or considered, due to the receipt of the petition, the city is required to call the election. Before the election can be called, the Board of Trustees must follow a statutory process under Section 388-2A to obtain and make certain information available to the property owners of the city and the ratepayers of the communications utility. That process has been completed and the election will be called. The ballot proposition will be for the Board of Trustees to be authorized to discontinue and dispose of the communications utility by sale. However, there is no requirement that the utility be sold. Section 388-2A sub 5 states that, quote, a proposal to discontinue and dispose of a city utility by sale that is approved by the voters pursuant to Section 388.2, subsection 2, paragraph A, shall not require the governing body or any purchasing entity to finalize a sale of the city utility, close quote. Therefore, the election is being held because the petition was received, but there are no plans for selling the municipal communications utility. So, number one, want to make sure the board is comfortable with that language, agrees that that is the accurate summary that should be distributed in order to give the full information without trying to sway the election, but simply give people clarity, transparency on the facts so that they are not misleaded by the language of a proposal to discontinue and dispose by sale, and they're not misled as to why the election is taking place. The other item to consider within this, just on August 10th, so after this language was drafted, the communications utility has received a letter, and Ken has forwarded this to me. It's a letter from Farmers Mutual Cooperative Telephone Company that is labeled indication of interest. And it goes on and talks about an interest in acquiring the utility. And it talks about what a transaction might look like and how the utility may be valued, and they don't give a dollar amount, but they talk about how they would come up with how they might come up with what they might pay, and will it exceed this amount, etc., and other various terms. But they also make it clear that they would require some things that nobody has discussed or agreed to. Number one, selling the utility. Number two, a right to use the fiber network constructed and owned by the electric utility. Number three, they outline due diligence they would have to do, and they make it clear that this is an indication of interest, okay, and they refer to it as an indication of interest in multiple places, and at one point they call it a preliminary. In fact, they call it a non-binding preliminary indication of interest. So the issue that I'm raising here is, before receiving that, the language of the summary proposal was drafted to tell the public that there are no plans in place or offers for sale of the utility, and there's no actual sale being proposed or considered, and that there are no plans for selling the communications utility. And now this letter of indication of interest has been received. And also keep in mind, 388.2A requires that any offers received must be posted on the website. But the indication of interest is not an actual offer. It's not called an offer. It doesn't say we offer you X, Y, and Z. It expressly states an indication of interest, that they would have to do due diligence before making an actual offer, etc. So I do not believe that the indication of interest is an actual offer. And consequently, I don't believe the indication of interest needs to be posted on the website along with the 388.2A packet of information. And I think the language in the summary of proposal is accurate, because there are no plans in place to sell the utility, to my knowledge. You would know, of course, and this is your statement, not mine. There's no offer for sale received, to my knowledge, and there's no actual sale being proposed or considered. I'm not aware of the board having actually being considering a sale. The phrase "no actual sale being proposed," that was drafted, of course, with the board in mind, that there's been no action on your side to propose or consider a sale. I guess it theoretically could be argued that this letter from Farmers Mutual Cooperative is a proposal from them, but it's not an actual offer. So is it a loose proposal for a sale, or again, it's labeled indication of interest? Again, I'm walking you through this. I want to make sure that you like and agree in the accuracy of the language in the summary of proposal. So we could do several things. We could leave the language as is if you think, yep, that nails it. If you think it's better on the fourth line of the summary of the proposal to take out the word proposed and just state there's no actual sale being considered because one hasn't been considered. But if you're worried that this letter of indication of interest is a proposal from outside and you think, so let's take out the word proposed, we could do that. If the board thinks, in light of this letter, we want to consider a sale, then we could further modify this. Or we could simply add a sentence at the end of the paragraph, if you wanted to, stating, for transparency, it is further stated that on August 10, 2021, a letter of indication of interest was received from Farmers Mutual Cooperative Telephone Company, which the board has not yet had an opportunity at this time to consider, or however we want to state that. So again, right now, we need to finish kind of walking through the form of Exhibit A. But while we do that, please think about whether and what you may want to do with this summary of proposal, keeping in mind that that summary is part of this notice, which gets mailed out to all the property owners of the city and the ratepayers of the communications utility. And we have put that same summary on the very first page of the packet so that when people click on the link, they get the full explanation as well as the index to the documents that are attached. So if the board wants to make a change, we would need to make the change in Exhibit A and in that summary on that very first page of the packet of information. Okay, so quickly running through the rest of Exhibit A. It goes on and states the information required by 388.2A can be found on the utility's website, and the instructions to find it are as follows. It goes through the instructions. It ultimately says, clicking on the link will bring you to the information required by 388.2A. Such information includes, but is not limited to, the following. It lists the 3 appraisals, the fair market value is determined by the board, the inventory of property, the statement of net position, the balance sheet, the financial information statement with including current rate schedules, projected rate schedules for the next 5 years, the 5 most recent fiscal years of revenue statements, and a projection of the revenue statements for the next 5 fiscal years, and a summary of the consideration of alternatives to disposal of the utility by sale. So you hear you're supposed to give a summary of the information included, so that's what this does. And then the notice is given by order of the Board of Trustees. So that covers the full resolution and the Exhibit A. But I think before the board takes action on this, I of course want to open it up for questions. But I also think we need to make sure the board is in agreement with the last sentence of Section 7, which states the secretary is further directed to post any offers and appraisals which may be received from potential purchasers. Of course, that's an accurate sentence, and you're required to do that. But I want to make sure the board's in agreement that the indication of interest is not an actual offer, and that's my advice, but I'm not a decision maker. And then going to Exhibit A, to that summary, and that same summary paragraph that's in the cover page to the documents, want to find out the board's input on whether the board agrees that the language is accurate as stated, whether we should remove the word proposed in the phrase no actual sale is being proposed. Now the board clearly has not proposed one, but given the receipt of an indication of interest, if that were considered to be a proposal from a third party, we could strike the word proposed out of an abundance of caution. Or if you want further revisions, or if we should add a sentence just explaining that an indication of interest has been received but has not yet been evaluated by the board as of this time, or any other changes the board wants to make. Again, this is the utilities statement. I'm here to advise, here to assist with that process. So I'd like input on whether you agree with the language or think changes would be appropriate, because of course the board's ultimately going to be taking a roll call on whether to adopt the resolution, including the exhibit. So we want to get the exhibit to be what you want it to be before you vote on it.
This is Steve Neal. He's our attorney on the money. He does all of our telecom and bonding.
Steve, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Would it be prudent to put in that summary of proposal that we currently are not proposing to sell the utility, but we have received an unsolicited indication of interest?
That can certainly be added. So I'm just making note.
That leaves it open if we
Currently
did
not
get a good offer,
proposing
it would,
to sell the
yeah.
utility, but wants it known.
I think we need to be transparent.
I'm sorry?
I say I think we need to be transparent.
Right. That's why I'm raising these issues. Exactly right. And it's just a matter of how do you articulate this? Because technically it's not an offer. Technically, I don't think you have to state it. But for the same reason I've advised explaining the petition and why you're going through this process and that you're not actually proposing a sale at this time, that explanation is to avoid misleading people. I think it's very suitable to make reference to having received the indication of interest so somebody can't claim that there's any misleading nature on the other side. And that's why I've raised this discussion. So I'm kind of making a note that the board is currently not proposing to sell the utility, but wants it known that on August 10, 2021, a letter with an indication of interest, or a letter from FMCTC containing.
Do you think we need to put FMCTC, or can we just say an unsolicited letter?
That's
With an
perfectly
indication
fine.
of
Yep,
interest.
we could state, yep, and then in fact, that's great language. So, an unsolicited letter with or containing an indication of interest in purchasing the communications utility was received by the utility. We could stop there, or we could add, as of this time, the board has not had opportunity or full opportunity to consider it. I don't know that you need to state that. I think you're being transparent by saying it's been received and that the board is currently not proposing to sell the utilities. So you can let me know if you'd like that sentence, or if you want to further add anything.
At
You want me to read it back?
At this point, there's really nothing to consider, because it's just that they're interested in,
Talking about it and looking at it.
yeah.
Yep, that's right. And the thing is, when, my suggestion is, this letter was literally, received 2 days ago. The staff had been working on the agenda. We had been working on this resolution. Everything was kind of, being teed up for the board to follow all of the 388.28 process and bring it to a head right now. So this letter is kind of brand new, fresh information. It can certainly go on an agenda for further discussion, and in the board's discretion, it can say we're not interested. In the board's discretion, it can say we're open to some discussions. We've got no decision to sell the utility, but if you want to, explore this, we can certainly entertain some discussions and decide later. The board has full discretion to do whatever it does or does not want to do with this unsolicited letter. But at some point, the board's going to have to decide, does it want to do something with it? Does it want to do nothing with it? Et cetera. Again, I think you are correct that, as of right now, there really isn't much to say other than receipt of it itself, because there hasn't even been a chance for substantial discussion or consideration of whether the board wants to do anything with that letter or not.
Correct.
Steve, this is Gene with the City of Harlan. Is there anything
Yes, Steve.
with receiving this notice or indication of interest that would negate the need of an election?
About this notice itself, or this indication of interest?
Yes.
I don't think so. So, in other words, if you're asking, would that change the ballot proposition, or if you're asking, would that require a separate election if anything were done with the letter? The answer to both of those questions is no.
Thank you.
Yep. And I would add, if the election, the ballot measure is not adopted by the public, right? If there's not a sufficient vote in favor of the ballot proposition, the board could not go forward with such discussions right in the heels. Not that they couldn't at some point explore a sale at any point in the near or long-term history and have another election at some point. But right on the heels of an election, if the voters say no, I think there'd be no need to spend time and money to explore the letter. You would have just gotten the answer from the voters that they're not interested in discontinuing and disposing of the utility by sale. So from that perspective, another option for the board would be wait till the outcome of the election before even deciding what to do with the letter, because you'd be spinning your wheels potentially if the election didn't pass. And let's say the election passes and the board were to consider this letter, nothing thereafter would require further election. It's simply, again, the election is for authority for the board to discontinue and dispose of the utility by sale. It doesn't mandate that there be a sale. And in fact, the 388.2A statute expressly says that no sale has to take place even if the election passes. So hopefully that's probably maybe more elaboration than you wanted, but I hope that gives you some more context to Gene's question. Does that help?
Yep.
How much is it gonna cost for this election? I mean, do we have to
I'm
have
sorry?
the election?
Yes,
Yes.
that's driven by 388.
So we have to have the election, and it's gonna cost a lot of money.
Yeah, basically.
Right. Having been assisting the utility throughout this process, and I apologize, I really didn't introduce myself fully at the start, and I heard somebody mention it later. So again, Steve Nadel at the Allers Law Firm in Des Moines. I'm bond counsel for HMU, as well as field questions from them from time to time as outside counsel. My legal practice is bond counsel for municipal utilities, cities, counties. I represent a substantial number of municipal utilities throughout the state. I also represent multiple associations of municipal electric utilities, and I represent the Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities. So I have, and I run our, obviously from all of that, I head up our municipal utility practice within our law firm. So I do substantial amounts of municipal utility work. And so that's my background. And so I apologize for not giving you that introduction earlier.
To your
And so,
point
so
about-
in response,
Excuse me, Steve,
because
did-
the petition was received and under 388.2, which is a longstanding statute, it's required that an election be held, and only the council can call an election.
that's why the council's
388.2A
involved.
was adopted last year and has an extensive procedure that must be followed by the governing body of a city utility before an election can be called, or at least before the election can be held. So the board has been obligated by 388.2A to go through all of that process prior to the election, and the city council is required to call the election, and both the board and the council are required to do those things because of the petition. So the board has not driven this process by seeking a sale. The city, through the city council or city representatives, has not driven this process by seeking a sale. Neither the board nor the council has sought an election. The petition that was received has driven all of this, and the board has gone to very substantial, and board and HMU staff have gone to very substantial effort over a number of months to go through all of this process at substantial staff time, at substantial cost to the utility. 3 appraisals have been received. One of them is an equipment appraisal that kind of goes in and is factored in by the other 2 primary appraisals that are required. There's the cost of the election itself, and then legal fees throughout this process, and substantial staff time throughout, multiple meetings with HMU, the city, myself. So this has been a substantial undertaking by everybody, trying to do everything exactly as required by statute in response to that petition. So I would state that in terms of time and monetary expense, it's been substantial, and everybody has been fantastic in doing that. to the T for purposes of doing what's required to comply with the statute because of the petition.
Also, since this is our only communication with our users and the public in general, would it be of any benefit to state, whereas, we are the municipal communications utility, how some of the history on it, that it was directed, HMU was directed to put together this utility as a result of an election way back when?
That could certainly, yes?
Steve, this is Matt Hudson.
Yes, Matt?
I agree with a few things that you said. I mean, we don't have to do anything or take any action today. That's completely up to the board and the board members and their comfort level with just receiving this information regarding the proposed thing they're thinking about buying it, that very vague letter we received. But I think that if we went any further to explain the origins of the utility, it could be perceived as us trying to persuade the voters.
Well,
Is that a thought that you share, or, well, here's what happened, we'd have to be very careful about doing that. If it would all have to be factually based,
So
And not-
500 people got to.
not seemingly trying to persuade.
500 people wrote their names on a petition?
No, 100.
Correct. So I am often asked by clients in the context of elections
And it's costing all this
what
money
they
for-
can and cannot say. The general rule is you cannot spend staff time or dollars advocating an election outcome. You can provide factual information. So it's very common in the context of an election to produce a set of factual, just not in this type of summary that we're talking about here, but just kind of an explanation or a Q&A, something that gives people more information, because it is quite common to feel that, this election's being called, and are you comfortable that everybody understands the context and the information that's out there, et cetera. So there's often an effort to present additional information, and Matt's right, it needs to be factually neutral and not advocating. I could live with, I think it'd be fine to add a sentence, I wouldn't belabor it, but to add, for further background regarding the utility was established following an election. That could be added. That does go, potentially beyond the summary of the proposal. This is supposed to be a summary of the proposal, and that talks about the history of the utility. So I would say not to include it here. And this is, I could go either way on it. My suggestion is not to include that here, but if you want to include that kind of history, you could provide a historical history of the utility, in some kind of a separate mailing or posting, or something like that. Again, a factually neutral piece of an informational distribution, if you think that is helpful for people. So you certainly can do something like that. If you want to add it here, I think we could. Again, I think it's probably cleaner to just stick with the summary proposal. I think it's lawful either way.
Steve, I have one more question. If the vote was to give the authority to sell the utility, how long is that authority good for? Does that go on for eternity? Or is there a time period?
The statute gives no time period for that. That's something we'd probably, as time goes on, we would need to look at is the best thing to say. There would be various considerations, whether to, give the voters another chance to vote before taking action after some passage of time. That might be desired, even if an election isn't required, just to, give voters a chance to have their say before the action's taken. Again, it depends on how much time passes. If we're talking 1 year versus 20 years versus something in between. And the discussion is different depending on how much time has passed. So I am sorry, that's a very lawyerly answer, but there is nothing stated in the statute regarding for how long the election result applies if authorization is given. And so I can only state that the question is a very good one, and that with the passage of time, if ever a sale is actually considered, thought should be given to whether to rely on the prior election or whether to hold a new one.
Okay, thank you.
We never did answer Michelle's question about what the cost of this whole election is going to be.
Yeah, basically, where we're at right now, we just had our audit. And the number that they're coming with, expenses through June 30 of this year, are roughly in excess of $61,000 or $62,000. That's through the end of June. And so we have all the expense since June preparing this document. We have the expense we'll have to send out the notifications, as well as all the additional legal expense involved with the election and the follow-up to the election. So the original amount we anticipated was $100,000 to $125,000 is what it was going to end up costing us. So,
Per 140 people complaining.
yes.
Wow.
As far as the resolution and all the supporting documents, I think with the changes that we made that we're not currently anticipating selling it, but we've received an unsolicited, what do they call them? Letter of interest. I'm good with what you put together, Steve.
The sentence that I wrote down is the Board of Trustees is currently not proposing to sell the communications utility, but wants it known that that on August 10, 2021, an unsolicited letter containing an indication of interest in purchasing the communications utility was received by the utility. So that's the sentence. We could simply add that at the very end of the summary of proposal, and I think that would avoid any possibility of somebody claiming that the prior verbiage of that summary is misleading or inaccurate in any respect regarding the comments about no actual sale being proposed or considered.
Do we need to clarify that it's simply an initial letter of interest and not a bona fide offer to purchase?
No, I don't think so.
Just leave it letter
I
of
think
interest?
just leave it like that.
Okay.
It says right in it that it's an indication of interest.
Yeah, okay.
And then put, it's gonna cost $120,000 to do all this.
Right.
Can't do that.
So what I am hearing is that the last, or that the board's agreement, this is not an offer, that the language in the summary of proposal as written is correct and accurate, but taking the high road out of an abundance of caution and a desire for transparency, the board would like to add the one sentence we have just discussed. That would be added as a final sentence to the summary of proposal as it exists in Exhibit A and as it exists on the first page of the packet of documents that will be posted on the website. And you will note that, number one, we're kind of modifying that language here as we're talking about it. You'll also note that Section 8 of the resolution states that the notice, the summaries, and the instruction as set forth in Exhibit A are hereby accepted and approved substantially in the form now before the board, with such changes as may be approved by the chairperson, secretary, and legal counsel for HMU. So that gives, not only have you just now nailed down the language that you want in there, but that Section 8 allows further changes consistent with all of this discussion. And so my suggestion is that the board can act and approve this resolution. And if you want, we can take a vote on adding the specific sentence. But I think that can be added with or without that second vote. And then ultimately, I will revise that paragraph and provide that to Ken, who can then provide that to the chairperson and secretary to review and make sure that that is in fact the sentence that we have discussed here and that is accurately written. If I tinker with a word or two for accuracy and clarity, I will do that, but it will be substantially the sentence that we've just discussed. And so with that, knowing that that's going to be done, I think the board can vote on this resolution, and that vote can state, with an added sentence to the summary of proposal, explaining that a letter of indication of interest has been received, if you would like to phrase the vote that way. Or again, we can do this any number of ways, because I think the language covers the change, or you can expressly make mention of it.
Okay. Well, I think, I still have a concern about educating the voter. I mean, if we don't tell them something about the history or what this is going to impact to them, because usually on a voter-driven issue, it's going to impact your taxes or your bottom line. This has no impact on those items. So, I think, and I'm not trying to, sway the voter one way or the other, but just say, here's the history, this is how it was formed, it's a private utility, it's pay for service, basically.
I think it is absolutely appropriate for the board to ask HMU staff to work on some type of an informational document for distribution, for posting and distribution, regarding the history of the utility and, whether this ballot proposition would impact tax dollars or property taxes, et cetera. That can be a short, narrow document. It can be expanded if there are more questions that the board think people may want to know the answers to. That's a discretionary item, as long as it is factual and not advocating for an outcome either way. And I see, Matt, are you looking to add a comment, or I just see the phone?
Well, I think that's exactly right, and I don't know that I think we're complying with what we need to comply with right now, and we can do that through another mechanism. Maybe make it part of the newsletter that's sent out or things like that in the future, but my understanding is that it's not necessary to include that in this particular vote.
Yeah, right. Right now, we are guiding the board through all of the compliance items, as Matt has very accurately stated. And what has now just been asked is, does the board want to, provide some further information, which would be perfectly appropriate if the board feels responsible for giving further information for context. Again, that happens very regularly in the course of elections, and the process for that would be to simply, ask staff to work on that, and they can work on that. They can get legal review from Matt or me or both of us, and that can be, ultimately prepared and presented back to the board for approval, if the board would like to make that request.
And that mailing can just go out in the regular bills that they get monthly.
It could go out as a stuffer with the bill, which would take it to all customers.
Right.
And we could do it in the form of a Q&A, along with, just kind of a
that only
reiteration
goes-
of the relevant facts.
But that goes to our current customers of the utility, not to the non-customers.
Well,
The
if we-
newsletter goes out to utility customers only, electric, gas, and water.
Okay,
It does not go out to telecom customers, and it will not go out to property owners.
Okay.
So, but
You're gonna have
Unless
most
you
of
want to
them.
do another separate
Yeah.
mailing, and
Yeah.
each mailing costs us $2,500.
Oh, I understand that, I know that.
So I would say just put it in with the mailing. I
the bill,
mean,
the utility mailing.
yeah, the utility mailing. I'm still shocked that 140 people come through and we have to do it.
So I would
Well,
make a motion.
personally, this is Matt Hudson. Personally, I'm having trouble hearing a few of the board members, so I don't know if I'm interrupting, and I don't mean to for certain. But I do think that there's different avenues of just putting it to the certain customers than, as opposed to doing that and also getting it out in the public in other respects. The factual background of how HMU, the telecom utility, came about and all of that. But I think that we're just talking right now about the compliance part.
Right.
And I think Steve and I can work on the other part of doing that.
Yeah.
Would that be an accurate statement, Stephen?
Correct. We'll need, to kind of get back on track with the resolution itself and taking that compliance action. But again, we're following the train of thought that, the board obviously feels that, this notice that's going out is a communication about what's going on. And the board is, or at least some have expressed here that there's a desire to provide further information, obviously fact-based and neutral in terms of, what people should do, but that the board feels it would be helpful to the voters to have additional background information, and that's appropriate to work on separately from this document. And then, the board can, think about and take action at a subsequent meeting to approve a Q&A document and how that would be distributed. Certainly, a mailing could be done, and, it could be, if that's prepared and put on the website and sent out with, your billing stuffers, et cetera. It also could be that the newspaper would want to publish it. So there's probably plenty of ways to get it out to the public. The key is, if the board would like staff to work on that with help from legal counsel, that process can start separately from approval of this resolution right now. And
I have no objection. I have no objection or disagreement with adding the language that was proposed to be added, that we did receive something. So I just wanted the board to know my input on that. I didn't get a very good, clear. I can hear Steve a lot better than I can hear everybody else. So, but my understanding was that, what Steve repeated back, that is transparency and that is appropriate.
And I should add, for everybody's benefit, the timing of this is driven by the fact that all of the packet of information has to be posted on the website at least 60 days before the election. And so for a November 2 election, wanting to give the utility time to get this posted, they decided to take present this to the board today. So there's a little bit of time before the information has to get posted, but the 60 days will come up pretty quickly. And I think the staff is just planning to get this information posted relatively quickly after the board takes action on this. And then the mailing, there's nothing in the statute that says when the mailing of this document that is called Exhibit A has to go out. But my advice is to send that out at least 60 days before the election, just for consistency with the posting of the information. Again, I can't say that is a 60-day requirement, but I think that is kind of a prudent thing to do. So staff is also prepared to mail out that notice once we make the final revision to it. I think even before, either tomorrow or early next week. So staff is prepared to get this stuff out there, essentially, right away within a few business days, if the board takes action and approves this resolution and the attachment.
Isn't part of that also going to be driven by the city council having to enact on this to call the special election and say we're in compliance?
Correct.
Posting?
Exactly. And the council is set to take that action on August 17th. So we have staged all of this to fit within the scheduled meetings of both governing bodies, to do it within time to get things done without urgency, et cetera. So it's all staged, and consequently staff is trying to get all of that done before the council meeting. I think if it were to happen after the council meeting, that would be okay and fine, but I think it's best practice is to get it done before the council meeting, and that's why staff is doing it that way.
We were planning on having everything posted tomorrow already. And the letter was already made to mail off to the company that's gonna mail it. Which will have to be changed now, correct?
Sorry about that.
Yes.
Well, I move to approve the resolution taking initial action regarding the potential discontinuance and disposal of the sale of Harlem Municipal Utilities utility.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote?
Michelle, yes.
Terry, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber die. Reluctantly.
We have no choice.
I know, but I can still vote aye reluctantly.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, item number 6, resolution.
If I can jump in, does the board want to formally vote on adding a sentence at the end of the summary to explain that an indication of interest has been received? Again, I think it falls within the language of the resolution that can be done if the board, again, it's just the transparency that the board's kind of making a statement that it wants that added. We could certainly have a vote on that.
Can we add that to the motion, because Terry did say
Yeah.
with that language change. So can I just?
Okay.
That's what I had planned on typing in the minutes.
Yep, that would be perfect then. Then you caught it correctly then. So it's covered.
Any other comments, questions? Moving on, item number 6, resolution number 37-2021, resolution to approve international long-distance telephone rates.
This is just to update our official resolution for long-distance rates hasn't been updated in a number of years, and we received a recent notification from ARIA on our long-distance provider, of what the latest rates are. So this is really just an update. Some customers may already be getting billed if they do make some international calls, but our effective date will be October 1. So we can give 30-day notice to customers.
Any other discussion?
Alaska and Hawaii are international? Did you
For
see that?
For purposes of dialing, yeah. That's what they're considered.
I thought they were part of the United States, but okay.
I move to approve the resolution.
I second.
I move to approve the resolution.
Okay,
I second.
vote?
Michelle, yay.
Terry, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber die.
Okay. Item number 7.
Thank you.
Thanks. Agreement for GIS services, annual renewal in the amount of $15,000 for mapping of electric, gas, and water distribution lines.
Yes, this is our annual in conjunction with the county and the city.
I'm guessing the board doesn't need anything more from me and probably doesn't want to pay me to stay on the line. I'm glad to stay on, or I can depart.
Thank you, Steve.
Goodbye.
Great, thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night. Yes, this is renewal for our annual GIS services, in conjunction with the county and city for mapping, online mapping utilities. So the recommendations for approval, it is budgeted.
What was all the breakdown on that?
That's just where we charge it in our general ledger.
Oh,
To the
okay.
various utilities, yeah.
Got it. I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second that motion.
Vote?
Michelle, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber die.
Okay. Moving on, item number 8. Electric natural gas vendor agreement, FY22, low-income home energy assistance program with West Central Community Action.
We're getting close to that time of year again for LIHEAP, and so this is our annual renewal for their services, or working with them on providing these services to customers. It has been reviewed by legal, and it is part of our annual budgeting, so it is budgeted. Any costs associated, it's mainly just for the transfer of funds. So.
There's actually no cost to us. It's
Yeah.
money that we get from
From them.
to help the customers. Last fiscal year, we got $142,000.
Yep.
I'll make a motion, we approve that.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call.
Michelle, aye.
Reese, aye.
Cyber Day.
I should state customers got 142,000.
2,000, yeah. Okay, and you're on.
All right, just a few quick items. First of all, some anniversaries for the month. Troy Ransom, his anniversary date was the 10th. He came on board in 2015. Paul Wingert, his anniversary date's the 28th. He came on in 2000. So we appreciate the years of service that our employees put in, and we like to recognize those anniversary dates. Another quick kudos for Jessica Gessert and Troy Ransom from a telecom customer for help in troubleshooting some problems. And then this kudo actually came from the mayor. He said that he had heard direct from a Prairie Fire employee that Prairie Fire very much appreciated all the cooperation from HMU, the city, with regard to their development, and they thought it was some of the best cooperation they've had with any of the projects. So I thought that was a good one for all the staff involved with Prairie Fire project. With regard to our audit, as I said, maybe you didn't hear it before, but we did have our audit this week. And so we'll be shooting for preliminary discussions with the auditors. This will be with the Budget and Finance Committee. We're currently looking at September 16th, 17th, or the 20th, with the expectation then that the audit would be before the board at the board meeting the end of September.
Was that an email gone out?
This is the
No,
first I heard of it.
I just, it came to me and Monty this morning, so we haven't got it right.
I thought maybe I missed
No,
it, because
no.
I don't remember
No.
seeing that one.
No, it just came this morning. I just wanted to make the board aware of it. Also, we're struggling with how to interpret all the things going on with CDC guidance regarding masks, all the changes and everything that are going on. So I just wanted to make the board aware. I don't know if some of our old COVID things are going to be coming back or not, but we're continuing to monitor, and we may have more updates by the next meeting. So,
We're getting more and more COVID cases.
are we?
Yeah, in Shelby County, yes.
Okay, all right, so,
And the Delta variant is more contagious, and if you've been vaccinated, you don't get it as bad, but
you can still get
you
it.
can still get it even with the vaccination.
Okay, all right. So we'll continue to monitor that, and we may have some updates in by the time we get to the next board meeting. If we need to do anything in between them, do I still have my authority?
Those policies are all null and void.
Okay, they were all null and
Yeah.
void, so I don't have the authority anymore, so we'd have to bring it back to the board. So.
One of the concerns that was brought up was having the public attend the meetings, just because we don't have enough room for everybody
separation.
Yep.
Yeah.
to
For separation,
so-
yeah.
Yeah, so, anyway, so we'll continue to keep the board updated as we get new information. Also want to let the board know that the latest water conservation letter went out on August 6th to all customers. That was where we revised the baseline date from March to June, and we already have people questioning that date, particularly, you know, we changed it from March to June because of the snowbirds. Now we're getting people requesting for the summer because they go to the lake all summer and they're not home. So it's,
And it's
you
being
can't
mailed out
win.
by cycle, so it was
Yeah.
mailed out to cycle 1 on the 6th, and then the other customers will get it tomorrow, and then cycle 3 customers will get it
Yeah.
next Friday. So not everybody has
And
gotten it yet.
I've heard people have already were conserving before.
Right.
So now all of a sudden we made this change.
Yeah.
And why did we make the change when they were already conserving before? So-
Yeah, and it's one of those things, it was trying to do the best we could with the information we had at hand, trying to set a standard, using some of the guidelines that came down from the DNR and IMU. But we'll continue to monitor that. You know, if we need to change it again, we may. But right now, we're in the process of evaluating where our water production is. And so we may have a recommendation or have some discussions with the board at the next board meeting regarding what the status will be with regard to the Tier 1 water warning. So just an FYI.
we're doing okay right now?
Right now, we're still holding our own, yes, yes. The other item that I'm not really sure how to proceed on, and that is, we did receive a request from Mertu with regard to whether or not we could make a contribution toward updates needed at the Peterson Family Wellness Center and Lewis Water Aquatic Center, whatever they call it. The preliminary indication from several of the board members is, maybe we should take a look at it. The concern is going to be, again, how we, what we're going to call it, because theoretically, we're not able to make donations, although we have in the past. We could potentially earmark it as economic development based on the fact that it is a big piece of what makes Harlan attractive for people coming into town. Or whether we use our typical in the past, some type of advertising or marketing of our broadband services. But anyway, I personally do believe it is a worthy cause. I think it's just a matter of the board determining how and what level we want to participate, so.
Do we have economic development funds left?
Yes, yes, we do have economic development funds. They were derived from the electric and the gas utility.
Okay,
Yeah, in excess of $220,000.
okay.
And this is going to be used for what, their pool updates?
Yeah, updates to the pools,
To the pool, to the lining of the pool?
lining of the pool. There was a number of
Yeah.
things, some new exercise equipment and some other upgrades there. But that place is well used. And,
Yeah.
Very well used.
Like I said, I do believe personally, my wife and I, we've been personal members of that for years. And, I do believe it's a big piece of what makes Harlan an attractive community, having a facility like that, so. that's
And
just
the Shelby County Bank,
Shelby County Bank went
Donated.
25,000, I believe it was, so. And I think overall, they're looking to raise somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 overall from the community, so. But anyway, so we'll be looking at various options and
I think that,
Putting it out
the
there.
economic development is
good
is
potential
really a
source.
good,
I think
good
so too.
potential source.
Okay.
Because I think you're right, it is, what do you think?
I guess I'd like to see what the amount of money we're looking at, because right now we've had a large number of unbudgeted items this year.
Yeah,
And,
The number that had been kicked around was 10,000.
okay.
yeah, I wasn't thinking do the 200,000.
Yeah, no.
I
Well,
would think, why wouldn't we just match Shelby County and make it 25?
25, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if Shelby County Bank can do 25, why can't we do 25?
Because the utilities is spending ratepayers' money and the Shelby County Bank is not.
Okay, so then we'll go with the 10,000 to make everybody happy.
And it's hard to
And then
justify
explain
a
to
rate
them-
increase when, we're
Yeah,
And then
around
explain
subsidizing
to them
the
how much
pool.
this is costing us,
Yeah.
this vote
You know,
of 120,000.
Yeah.
But, I think $10,000 of economic development funds, because we have always set
Right.
aside economic development funds.
And we've had a number of discussions about what we should use those funds for. They've been sitting in that fund for a long time, so.
And so, looking at this as part of economic development, I think that's,
Okay, all right. Well, we'll potentially take another look at it, visit a little bit with the lawyers about how we classify it, visit with the accountants about how we classify it, and then we may potentially then bring a proposal back to the board at the next meeting, so. Okay, all right, thank you.
That it?
That is all I have officially to discuss, yes.
Any other questions?
I have 8 questions. I'm going back to the water thing. So, say in June, I used 18,000 gallons, and the next month, maybe 16, and then I have company come in, or friends, or whatever. So, does that extra 200 gallons, could I use 20,000 then in September? And average my 18?
Right now, the way it's set up is just based on the June usage. If you exceeded your June usage. But that only applies if we get to that point where we have the
Well,
water emergency.
Yeah, only if we go to the next level or
Right,
tier.
only go to tier two.
Well, we'd have to go through tier 2 and then to
Yeah.
the emergency before any penalties would apply.
I didn't know.
Yeah,
'Cause,
We-
well, you know, if you get friends or if you're gone for a week or two or whatever.
We have, I believe we have stated in, I can't remember if it's in the formal policy or if we've just discussed it, that if customers have what they believe are unusual circumstances, they can call and
Oh.
have a discussion with customer service, so.
before any penalties
Right.
would be assessed, we said would be reviewed by the board, so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so.
You know, we're not looking for the person that uses 1,000 to 2,000 gallons of
Yeah.
water. There's
Yeah.
other major users out there that use 4 or 5 times what a family does.
Yeah,
So, any other questions? Anything?
I would just comment and add to what was just mentioned is, you likely hearing as well, just the misunderstanding that there are different tiers. So that's, in my conversations, probably the first point of education is that
yeah,
none of this applies until you get to the emergency status, and they're 2 steps away from that.
right,
Right.
Thank you once again for doing your part if you are.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
And,
I mean,
but that's for, well, we're not in that now, so we all want to avoid that. So these penalties and all these other things, like,
Yeah.
okay, now I remember the letter, and it talked about there are a couple
Yeah.
of tiers, pointing back to the website.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's a common misunderstanding that.
hopefully we're in the dog days of the summer,
Policies in case you did.
and we only got
Couple more weeks, hopefully.
6, 8 more weeks, and we'll be through.
How about 3 or 4?
I like
Well,
it too.
yeah,
And everybody do a rain dance. Please do a rain dance.
well,
Well, let's not do
Well,
it like they did in Omaha.
Yeah, not like that one.
we've been somewhat fortunate, the weather's cooperated, and
Right.
everybody's done a great job on it.
Yeah.
So, anything from the online group? Oh, they're all gone now?
No, anything from Matt or Troy?
I thought they checked out.
Nothing from Troy?
Okay,
Okay,
then we be adjourned.
all right, good, thank you.